When ordinary people don't want to admit that they're at home, it's enough for them to ignore doorbell or home phone calls. Queen Elizabeth II is deprived of the opportunity to resort to this trick. As soon as she crosses the threshold of Buckingham Palace, the British flag on the flagpole is replaced by the royal standard, and 4 guards take over the watch at the gate instead of 2. The guards perform a decorative function. They won't be much use when storming the palace. In addition to the ability to stand at attention for hours, only strictly defined physical characteristics are required from the guys. The guards take men 180 centimeters tall, with a chest no wider than 92 centimeters, because only with such parameters will the historical uniform, sewn about 100 years ago, fit them well. Uniforms are passed from retirees to new recruits. You can't change the shape, and it's better not to even think about how thoroughly you can wash such an old fabric without compromising the color. Probably, the willingness to put the honor of the uniform above personal hygiene is also included in the list of requirements for a potential guardsman. Noticing Elizabeth II's arrival at Buckingham Palace is hard to miss, but dropping in for tea with her is just as difficult, even if you happen to be Prince Charles or another close relative. For the heir to the throne to see one of his parents, his private secretary must contact the private secretary of the Queen or the Duke of Edinburgh and schedule an appointment. Neither a private setting nor blood relations exempt members of the royal family from observing formalities. When greeting the Queen and her husband, a man must bow his head and a woman must curtsy. On days of large family gatherings, the question, who bows to whom and under what conditions, becomes crucial. This portion of the protocol is personally rewritten by the Queen with every addition to the family. For example, the number of curtsies required of Catherine, Duchess of Cambridge, depends on whether Prince William is accompanying her. If not, Catherine must curtsy to the royal couple, to the Prince of Wales, to his wife Camilla, and to all princesses of the blood. In William's presence, the princesses drop off the list, just like Camilla, if she's without Charles. The Queen begins receiving visitors an hour before noon, but not because she likes to sleep in. No one in Buckingham Palace wakes later than 9, since that's when the piper arrives under the windows, serving as the universal alarm clock. For 15 minutes, he performs Scottish military marches, without stopping for a second, even if someone throws flower pots at him. The Queen usually gets up at 7:30. She and her husband Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, haven't shared a bedroom for a long time, partly because they have very different ideas of comfort. The Duke loves all sorts of appliances and gadgets, while Elizabeth can't stand them. After much hesitation, she accepted the vacuum cleaner, but only under the old condition for cleaning royal chambers. The maid must move backward so her shoes don't leave marks on the carpets. The palace staff joke that human footprints are not the biggest problem in the Queen's apartments. She once lived with an entire pack of Corgis, but in 2015 she decided not to breed dogs anymore, so they wouldn't be orphaned after her death. The last purebred Corgi, Willow, moved to the Great Kennel in the Sky in April last year. Now Elizabeth is accompanied only by Vulcan and Candy, Dorgis, born from the union of a corgi and a dachshund, and they can still make life miserable for the staff. Each maid carries a spray bottle with a soda solution and paper towels, because the dogs often go in corners. Sometimes the siphon has to be used as a club to make a dog let go of a leg. They're yappy, they're bitey, and we all hate them, one footman confessed. The Queen doesn't train them herself and won't let anyone else do it. Even after electric kettles were invented, the Queen boiled water for tea on the stove, driving her impatient husband mad. Eventually, Philip kidnapped and, without asking, electrified her favorite silver kettle. But the rest of the ritual remained unchanged. First, Elizabeth II studies the contents of the jade tea caddy, trying to determine whether the leaves are small or large. The former require 3 minutes of brewing, the latter 6. The teapot is loaded with 1 spoonful per cup. Pouring must be done carefully so that not a single tea leaf ends up in the cup. The Queen drinks tea barely warm, with milk without sugar, and she almost always breaks her dietary routine by nibbling some biscuits before breakfast. While the maid fills the bath, Elizabeth listens to the latest news on the radio and reads the morning papers. She favors the Daily Telegraph and the Racing Post. The latter has nothing to do with politics or economics. It's entirely devoted to horse racing. One cannot begin the day with nothing but the horrors of our little world, after all. At 8:30, the Queen, dressed and coiffed, goes down to breakfast in the dining room overlooking the palace gardens. There she meets her husband for the first time that day. He usually spends the morning in the palace pool. The staff are allowed to swim too, but they may remain in the water with a royal only with his or her permission. The Queen saves her physical activity for the country estates. There she rides horses, hunts, and at Balmoral even catches bats with a net from under the hall ceiling. The bats are then released. They've grown used to this odd pastime and don't mind. The couple are served muesli with yogurt and maple syrup, fresh fruit, and toast with marmalade. After breakfast, Her Majesty goes to the sitting room to read letters from subjects and official documents, delivered every morning in a leather briefcase known as the Red Box. On her desk stand 2 inkwells, black ink for working documents, green for personal correspondence. The Queen is protected by officers of the Royalty Protection Branch, some of whom let the proximity to the court go to their heads. A few consider it acceptable to show up to guard duty drunk or hungover. The Chief of Security dislikes drawing attention to his subordinates' immoral appearance, so he suspends them only in extreme cases. If the officer can stand steadily, he's given a weapon and sent to patrol the palace. The truly incapacitated are put to sleep it off in the servants' rooms after being given something sobering. All violators are supplied with mint candies, for breathing yesterday's beer onto the Queen is poor form. It is no surprise, then, that British bungling guards committed the most embarrassing breach in modern monarchical history. In June 1982, Irish layabout Michael Fagan twice scaled the wall and climbed a drain pipe into the palace. The first time he simply drank wine from Prince Charles's stores, sat on the throne, and relieved himself in a dog bowl. The alarm went off, but the guards switched it off so it wouldn't disturb their sleep, and the maid who spotted Fagan was told she had imagined the man in the window. 3 weeks later, at 7:15 a.m., Arne Didkegin Sjolstin, a drunken Michael Fagan, woke the Queen. On his way to her bedroom in the dark, he accidentally broke a glass ashtray and cut his hand. The Queen was sleeping alone, he later recounted. She had on a long floral nightgown. Elizabeth woke, saw a disheveled, barefoot, blood-stained man, and escaped into the adjoining room where the duty maid was dozing. While the women tried calling the guard post, where not a single living soul was present, Michael sat on the bed and told the story of his life. He paused once to ask the Queen for a cigarette. The maid had some. After 10 minutes, the problem of the uninvited guest was solved by 23-year-old footman Paul Wybrew, who had just returned from walking the dogs. Paul said, "Mate, you look terrible. I think a sip of booze will do you good," Fagan recalls. "We went to a small kitchen through the hall, and he poured me a glass of whiskey. And then the police showed up." After the incident, Michael spent 6 months in a psychiatric clinic. Paul became the Queen's favorite page, and palace security remains good only for jokes. Thrill-seekers wander onto the grounds whenever they please, yet earlier this year a patrolman nearly shot Her Majesty, who'd been unable to sleep, and went out into the park for fresh air. "Damn it, I could have killed you," the terrified guard blurted when the dark figure wandering among the trees explained who she was. "You're right," the Queen replied calmly. "Next time I'll phone ahead so you won't feel obliged to shoot me." Additionally, Elizabeth II recently discovered that someone was stealing Bombay mix snacks from the bowls placed in the corridors for her personal use. She discreetly marked the food levels and monitored them for several days. Needless to say, the snack thieves turned out to be the guards. Often the Queen's daytime schedule includes outings into the city. She attends select official events, visits the charities she patronizes, goes to the races, and sees the dentist. Other doctors are summoned to Buckingham Palace as needed, though Her Majesty and the Duke of Edinburgh dislike being treated. They consider bodily illnesses a direct consequence of weakness of character. According to protocol, the Queen must take a chauffeur-driven car to public engagements, but away from crowds and city traffic, she gladly takes the wheel herself. Elizabeth has been obsessed with cars since childhood. During World War II, she served in the Auxiliary Territorial Service, first as a mechanic and then as a driver of trucks and ambulances. Even today, if a car breaks down on the way to a country estate, the 92-year-old monarch, the only qualified mechanic in the royal family, can quite possibly repair it. Her Majesty's garage is valued at £10 million. The cars are exclusively British: Jaguars, Bentleys, Land Rovers. The public would not approve if the Queen drove around the country in foreign-made vehicles. Since Elizabeth grew accustomed to trucks during the war, she feels most comfortable behind the wheel of an SUV. She never misses a chance to personally drive friends or relatives, and only the Duke of Edinburgh flatly refuses to be her passenger. He claims that his venerable wife, by force of habit, still drives as if the road were being bombed. In 1998, Prince Abdullah of Saudi Arabia agreed with the Duke after the Queen, at full tilt, drove him along the rural roads around Balmoral. The terrified prince, sweating bullets, begged Her Majesty via an interpreter to slow down. And 2 years ago, Elizabeth casually took a sharp turn onto the shoulder in Windsor Park to avoid a young couple with a stroller who had wandered into the road. She even managed to smile and wave, signaling she wouldn't behead them for causing a traffic hazard. To be fair, the 97-year-old Duke of Edinburgh is no careful driver either. He concluded 2018 with a Christmas-time crash, driving his Land Rover into a car with 2 women and a baby. A passerby helped everyone out of their wrecked cars. The Duke told him he couldn't see the road because of the glaring sun, though Emma Fairweather, a passenger in the other car, insisted it was a cloudy day. Emma broke her wrist in the collision. Her friend and the child were unharmed. Police gave the royal elder, who escaped with minor cuts, a gentle scolding for not wearing a seatbelt. Judging from later photos of Philip driving a new Land Rover, this was not enough to teach him to use one. Before the internet era, such motoring tales involving majesties and highnesses were discreetly hushed up. But one more of the Duke's accidents became known. In 1964, he failed to negotiate passing a gentleman named Cooper. That day, Elizabeth II was accompanying her husband and fortunately was unharmed. Once it was clear everyone was fine, Cooper offered to treat the royal couple to tea or something stronger, but received a polite refusal. The Queen's workday is scheduled to the minute. First, she receives foreign ambassadors. British ambassadors newly appointed abroad, newly made judges and bishops, and senior government and military officials. Each receives 20 minutes. Sometimes an investiture ceremony is held instead of or after an audience. Once a month, the Queen invites friends for an informal lunch. The rest of the time, she spends part of her lunch break walking in the park. When the Queen is airing her head, the staff try not to cross her path. After lunch comes time for business trips around the city if needed. Incidentally, protocol forbids the Queen and direct heirs to the throne from traveling together by car, plane, train, or ship. In the worst-case scenario, at least one of them must survive. But as the example of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge shows, not everyone follows protocol. On Wednesdays, Her Majesty meets with the Prime Minister. Their meeting has no time limit and is held tête-à-tête behind closed doors. At 7:30 in the evening, daily, the Queen receives the minutes of Parliament. Then she may do as she pleases unless she has an official dinner or a visit from relatives planned. Once finished with business and family, the Queen sits down to read a detective novel or solve crosswords. Elizabeth never peeks into a dictionary, considering it dishonest. Around the same time, the television in her apartments is switched on. The monarch adores wrestling and has not missed a single episode of Downton Abbey in which she gleefully hunted for historical inaccuracies. As before lunch, before bed, Her Majesty drinks a small glass of gin with Dubonnet, a fortified herbal wine, in a 1-to-2 ratio. She is irritated by the clinking of ice cubes, so the Duke of Edinburgh invented a gadget that chips ice into pellets. The Queen dislikes blankets, preferring to sleep under thin woolen sheets. The light in her Buckingham Palace windows is almost always the last to go out.